All right, we are live. Amazing. We are on episode 45 of Beyond the CMS. The show started with the intent to bring the leading thought leaders in the content industry together to have open conversations around the state of content operations now and into the future. And I was inspired by the car guys, actually, who I listened to on NPR. And I just really thought it was cool that people could call in and get their solution to their carburetor problems done over the airwaves and have a friendly conversation as well. And I think we've just got an amazing lineup of great thought leaders here today. So just before I introduce special guests for the week, I want to say thanks to everyone who's making some time during their lunchtime in the Eastern time zone and breakfast over on the West Coast. We're live on LinkedIn right now. The way the show works is if you have any questions for any of us, please leave something in the comments. The technology on our end should have your comments show up and we'll be happy to answer them. If that doesn't work for some reason, we'll be looking through the comments and we'll get back to you. Or if you're watching this in the future, leave us a comment, give us a like. We really appreciate it. I'm Chris Bryce. I'm the founder and CEO of Dotfusion. We are a Contentful partner. And today we've got Luke Wertz and Nick Switzer from the solution engineering team from Contentful joining us to share their thoughts on what's happening in the world of content. And I know you guys have engineering backgrounds and you're kind of bridging over to solutions. And that's really a great broad scope of information that you might be able to share with us. So maybe Luke, maybe introduce yourself and then we'll kind of get going and have a really wonderful chat.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having us, Chris. It's a real privilege to be here. I'm Luke Wertz. I manage the commercial mid-market solution engineering team for Contentful here in North America. And yeah, as you mentioned, I spent a whole bunch of years, about 20 years on the implementation side. So helping implement a wide variety of CMSs for a whole lot of different types of customers. And now I get to help at the solutioning stage. So pretty early in planning and thinking about how to solve specific business challenges with technology.
Amazing. Nick, welcome. I know you're in the high mountains. What's going on?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Great to be here. Yeah, joining from Denver, one of Contentful's headquarters cities. So we've got a great presence here. I think, like you said, and then honestly, I would just kind of be repeating a lot of what Luke had to say if, I told you a little bit about my background, because I think we've had the privilege of kind of having our careers overlap for the last 15 or so years. But like Luke, spent about 20 years in the CMS space, ran an implementation team for quite a while before coming to Contentful, and now, like Luke said, sit on the pre-sale side, focused on consulting, solving business problems. My team specifically supports our enterprise customers and prospects. And I think it's important that I set expectations here that I'm not the carburetor guy. So we'll point those questions towards Luke. I think he's doing more of that type of work.
Awesome. Can't wait. Maybe I'll kind of ask one or the other of you questions to keep it simple. But Luke, do you want to just talk a little bit about Contentful's history? I think that the idea was created in Berlin, I believe. Is that right? Yeah. Can you just share a little bit about what is Contentful?
Yeah, absolutely. So Contentful, as you mentioned, we founded in Berlin based, though we have offices all over the world now. And it really started with a simple idea, which was back when Sasha and Paolo founded Contentful. In order to update content in a native mobile app, like on an iPhone or an Android phone, you had to release a whole new version of the app in order to just update the words, the pictures, the content. And that the overhead there becomes really, really big for teams, right? As they're thinking about now needing to manage multiple versions of apps that are out there. So the idea was, how do we make it easier for teams to manage the words, the pictures, the digital experiences, and be able to deploy them from a centralized location, kind of regardless of the channel. So even though it kind of started off as a native mobile app thing, it caught on really quickly in a lot of different spaces. So normal websites that you might think of leverage this kind of architecture and technology at scale. Mobile apps, digital signage, basically anywhere where you need to get messaging to a device that's connected to the internet, chances are taking a headless approach or using a platform like Contentful to do that is going to make it easier. It's going to scale better, streamline the process. It's a really cool solution to a problem that was very emergent back in the early 2010s when Contentful was founded.
Interesting. And from our experience, and to kind of align with what you just said, one of our larger Contentful projects was for a very large pizza chain, and the solution required just that, a centralized content hub, let's say, for a mobile app and for a website, and for the future plumbing for display screens at the retail locations. You know, it doesn't really matter when you use this kind of, let's call it composable or headless architecture. Let's say you can really publish anywhere, but you don't have to change the core kind of foundation of where your content is. I kind of use this word, and I have a collection now of different people giving me definitions of headless, because I'm still asked this today, and I think it's still kind of an industry term. The folks who are our customers and who watch the show now and in the future are typically marketing folks, CMOs, VPs of marketing, and they're not so concerned of like what the tech stack is. They're just really concerned about the easiness of their publishing workflows. But maybe, Nick, do you want to give me your best definition for the record of how you define headless?
Yeah, for sure. And you know, maybe I'll start by reframing it just a little bit, because I think, you know, our founder Paolo said something interesting on a public internal meeting we had, just that like he never really liked the idea of headless because it defined more what the platform is not rather than what it is. And so, you know, I think we like to use terminology like, you know, content infrastructure was something that we came across like quite a few years ago. And I think now we hear the term composable a lot in the market. And I think not so much to say, oh, Chris, you're wrong, don't use that language, because I mean, it's a fully valid term, but I think more just like acknowledging that there's some interchangeable terms that all talk about, I think, similar value, right? Where the idea is really, I like content infrastructure a lot because I think it feels particularly relevant in the world that we're headed into and really starting to live in today, where you're delivering and managing content with, you know, with agents, with lots of different tools. You know, we're thinking a lot about AEO, we're thinking a lot about agentic assembly. And really, to get back to your original question, what is headless? Like, headless is all about separating the content from the presentation, right? And so that's impactful in those areas because it lets you build your content as clearly structured elements with very clearly governed, with clear governance and processes around them, right? That are going to make it a lot easier to build those use cases you're talking about. Like, you know, quick serve restaurants is a great example, right? Because that's when we have a lot of customers in that space where, simple example, you've got your promo for, you know, your Tuesday lunch special. That's going to look a little different on your website. It's going to look a little different on your mobile app. It's going to look a little different on your drive up order screens. And you're probably going to have regional restaurants that want to localize that as well, right? And the real power of headless is you manage that content in one place, you update it in one place, and it gets pushed out to all of those different channels. And, you know, you can know that it's the right content, it's properly governed, and, you know, the folks on the other end of that, those experiences, regardless of where they are going to have a consistent way of engaging with your brand.
Awesome. I'm kind of bending the conversation around kind of simple terminology, and then we'll get into some developer speak too, because this is really important for devs who are exploring kind of different ways to ship and deliver. But maybe, Luke, do you want to just describe a little bit more about the headless architecture itself and the idea behind microservices and kind of the greater developer kind of speak around the opportunities with Contentful?
Absolutely. And at the risk of going too nerdy, please hold me.
Bring it on.
Hold me back if right.
Yeah, we're all over.
The again, rooting this in the value, right? Like, why do you make this choice? Because at the end of the day, at the risk, I don't know if I can say this, like, does your architecture matter if it's doing its job? Right? Like, at the end of the day, we're not choosing these things for funsies, and we're not choosing them out of ideologies. We're choosing them because we need to accomplish something. And so when we talk about microservices or a headless architecture, what it is enabling people to do is shift the focus away so much from what is the content in abstraction, and really center the conversation around what is the job of the content. Because once you start focusing on what do I need this content to do, chances are where you're presenting it, you need the content to do the same job, regardless of whether it's being presented on a website or native mobile app. And so working back from this idea of your content is a job. Can you articulate what the job of your content is? You can, cool. Then you can probably express that in a content model. And now we're starting to get into some of the underlying plumbing that goes into this. So now we have this abstract idea of a thing that helps you describe the job of the content. Once you have that, cool. Now we can abstract this one level further and create instances of that content. So you can create multiple types of this content, and you're managing it in a centralized place, but you're able to distribute it to many different places. Now that final sort of like last mile of delivery, whether that be to the mobile app or the website, regardless of what that last mile is, that has a lot of influence on the everything around the content, right? That experience as a whole. But the job of the editorial team, the marketing team, these folks have lots of different titles these days, right? But the folks who are in charge of thinking about what are the words and what's the job that they have, they get to concentrate that effort in one place and have that impact felt widely. So there's my best shot at a non-technical definition of a headless architecture.
That is awesome. That is awesome. And I'm actually kind of role playing through some conversations I've had recently, also trying to describe like why to consider this composable architecture to a very non-technical team. I was lucky. I had a stakeholder who was a developer, and I was kind of put on the spot, and they're like, well, what do you recommend? And I kind of avoided any platform specific, but I said like Next and React, it's awesome for so many reasons. And that's kind of a fundamental, decision that you can make powering Contentful with that kind of stack. Something else came up in that conversation, which is like, where do we host it? I think they've got a Dream host server or something like that. And it's like, well, you don't really host anymore, but you kind of do. And it like kind of, there's this static site generation and like an edge network. I think you guys might be able to help clarify some of that stuff as well. Nick, can you take a shot of like, how do you answer like, where is the Contentful site hosted?
Yeah. And I mean, piggybacking on some of what Luke was saying earlier, I think like it's easy to get lost in the weeds of that. And like, yes, there are important conversations to be had around, your CDN configuration. How are you thinking about cache invalidation, and what's your front end framework, that you can really get lost in the weeds with those. But like ultimately, what is the outcome you care about? And when you think about it from, a technical perspective, I think from that side of the world, it really comes down to like getting to market faster and operating more efficiently as a business. And I think, as someone, again, I know Luke and Chris, you can speak to this firsthand too, but as someone who worked in the world of, self-hosted, manually updated, like open source CMS, we all know the personal pain, but also like the organizational investment and resource time and loss of velocity that goes into, maintaining hosting. I mean, like we go way back, you talk about like applying Linux patches and monitoring for security updates and, applying core platform updates, applying plugin or module updates. There's a whole world of work that just stacks up there. Right. And I think, when you talk about, where is it hosted from a purely Contentful standpoint, like it's a SaaS platform, right? And I think there's just a huge benefit to SaaS in the fact that we have a dedicated infra team, we have a dedicated security team, and we have battle tested APIs and CDN configurations that perform at scale and deliver literally billions and billions of requests like every month. And that is all work that your team is no longer doing. And when I say your team, I'm talking about our joint customers, our joint prospective customers. That's all work they are no longer taking on, where those teams can now focus on higher value opportunities, right? Like, how do we build net new things that drive the business forward in more meaningful ways? So again, at the risk of, not completely like talking around your question, I think I just want to make it clear that like, where is it hosted is like, we handle all of that from the Contentful standpoint. And I think like we've got a lot of great partners in the industry. I know we talk a lot about Vercel in particular, as you think about the broader network, that I think brings a really similar value proposition to front end hosting and delivery, and ultimately all focused on that same outcome of let's help you get to market faster. Let's help you be more operationally efficient and just, do more with less and, create the value and revenue growth that your company ultimately cares about.
Super cool. I was speaking to our COO, and she's like, "Dude, I just published a site to Vercel using Claude Code." I'm like, "The world is so awesome right now." It's like, wow, that's really cool, Yep. So shout out to those guys, and they're just really making delivery of ideas like quick, easy, and manageable. Now, I guess when we talk about CMSs, because this is a show sort of about CMSs, they kind of fall into maybe three kinds of categories. Say there's these kind of maybe legacy, I think is a fair term, kind of a WordPress, Drupal kind of ideas that have been around and matured through open source communities over time. And then I guess in the middle, we have kind of headless, composable, super fast, light, quick to get to market. And then there's a term that I'm not sure is quite right, but monolithic seems to be the ones that is getting passed down the industry, more heavy infrastructure, does a lot of things, sometimes a little bit more than people are using. I want to just kind of understand where Contentful stands kind of in the range of these types of platforms. And then we'll get into, a question that always comes up from folks that are looking to move into a more modern stack like Contentful is migration itself. But maybe Luke, what are your thoughts on how I've kind of defined that ecosystem, and maybe add some color to it if you feel it's appropriate?
I think that's totally fair, right? So these solutions, they emerge to solve specific problems, right? And when you look at the self-hosted, the legacy, the Drupals, the WordPresses, they really existed to try to lower the barrier to entry, get folks who are maybe just starting out and need to get something up and running and need a lot of community support in order to be able to do that. Like that makes some sense. It's a choice, right? It comes with pros and cons. When I think about sort of that continuum, the more on the monolith side, right? Like nobody got fired for choosing IBM. There are safe choices perhaps out there. Those solutions exist, and they exist to solve a specific problem set as well, which may or may not be related to business problems.
Yeah, fair enough.
So when I think about solutions like Contentful, composable solutions that really focus on being able to integrate widely to expedite the process of migrating into the platform, like we acknowledge, most people are probably coming to Contentful from somewhere else. We have to make that really straightforward for them to be able to migrate. To your earlier point, like we sit sort of in this space where we know that people who are coming in need to move fast. They need to be able to move fast to ship things. Their needs are going to be pretty varied in terms of where they need their content to not only be delivered, but where else in their tech stack they might need their content to be transformed or actioned upon, reviewed, whatever that may be, that's the point of the API first part of that headless sort of definition. Is it's super easy to have content that is created and managed in Contentful show up in other places so that it can be transformed and then programmatically written back in without an editor needing to go copy and paste. And so once teams start to feel the pressure, if we think about sort of like growth out of those legacy systems, once teams start to feel the pressure of like, I really actually need my content to do something for me. It can't just sit there and be there. Like it actually needs to do something. That's when we see folks starting to look at headless composable type solutions like Contentful. We make it easier to do the meaningful things with your content.
Yeah. I'm trying to create some legacy of this conversation that would be really helpful for folks who don't know which to choose. Just that thinking.
Just choose Contentful. That's easy.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Makes a lot of, well, that's what we did, and it makes a lot of sense. I used to roll with kind of global integration shops and did a lot of AEM work in my day, and that has a place. But it came back to smaller agency size where we need to get stuff done quickly without multiple layers of engineering as well. So another kind of point that is often like maybe not known about going with a Contentful type platform, and Contentful in particular, is that we can dev on it so quickly with a more narrow engineering skill set. It's kind of primarily front end, and we've got a little bit of tooling, but man, we can go look at these split and get stuff done that's really beautiful. Our ethos is kind of beautiful technology. We love things that look pretty, and we're not limited by kind of the tooling that's connecting kind of the presentation from the back end. So we're free to run. And I know your portfolio of projects from global brands also backs up the ability to create really beautiful experiences as well. I think that's super important. I think we mentioned this. Time goes by really quickly as we get going here, but got to throw some AI into the conversation. I think AI is impacting content platforms and the experience of using them in a couple different ways. There's AI within the platform, and then there's the external use of your own frontier modeling systems at your agency, brand, organization to interact with the platform. Maybe Nick, can you take us down an AI path?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Let's go. And I'm glad you mentioned it, because I kind of hinted at this earlier too, but I think just like what's really fascinating that I think folks are starting to pick up on, it feels like this year, probably, if we think about where this is coming out, is like, there's the delivery side. And I think that's kind of what we've been thinking about for quite a while. But, I mentioned the management side as well, right? And I think that's where kind of going back to that distinction between like the legacy, the monolithic, the composable, and, what is headless, what does API first actually mean? And I think that's where, we're really starting to see some interesting impact right now is Contentful, again, API first from day one. And I think like we've talked a lot about the delivery side of that. It makes it easier to get content into mobile apps, into websites, into like digital displays, but it's also API first on the management side. And what that means is everything you do in the Contentful interface, you can also do via an API. Like when you click in that interface, it's literally just calling what we call our content management API under the hood. And, getting back to your question about AI, what that means for AI is machines understand code. APIs are how machines talk to each other. And, by some, amazing coincidence, like headless platforms and, I would posit Contentful specifically are very well positioned to interact with those agents, both through in-platform integrated AI, which I think, we have quite a bit of and can certainly speak to if we wanted to. But I think also like when you think about those tooling ecosystems that a lot of businesses are using and really looking at like, how do we start to incorporate agents into our day-to-day work and get that done? Like agents can natively interact with the platform and do, all of the same things that a human can. And I think when you can combine those two things into that system we've talked about, that's really kind of like, we talk a lot about this idea of the process of create, scale, and govern your content, right? And when you can have agents creating that content for you, but then have Contentful that's always done the scale and the governance side of that really well, making sure that you have humans in the loop, making sure that's being delivered to all of your channels in a really dependable way. I think that's where businesses are really going to be like starting to see that acceleration from like meaningful AI involvement in their workflows, not just kind of like, hey, Claude, go write me a blog post with no idea about, who I am, what I talk about as a brand, right?
Mm-hmm. Just going to take a minute and acknowledge someone from Denver saying hello. And Gabriel says on LinkedIn here, it really feels like we passed the tipping point favoring composability. There are differences, but the cost benefit seems more imbalanced these days, especially with AI coding. Gabriel, if you are still listening, if you can clarify that, we'll definitely address it. But the one point I'm going to pick out of that I think is worth just chatting openly about, and one of the, I guess, challenges of composable overall systems is total cost of ownership. And as an agency, we need different methodologies of associating total cost when we're kind of scoping out projects. And the interesting part is the CMS or Contentful itself is typically not the barrier. It's figuring out the scope of connecting ancillary tooling. And I think, at least I'd love some feedback, Luke and Nick, on this. What I'm seeing is that there's been an acknowledgement from the headless CMSs and Contentful in particular, where they're not so rigidly kind of API only. Like, okay, we do have a visual editor, and that move just made a lot of sense. So you get the best of both worlds. You can see what you're doing, but you're also working with content models as well. And maybe Luke, if you want to talk about just this concept of where are you rigid around the composable idea versus what kind of makes sense for people using the tooling and figuring out how much it costs.
Oh man, we don't have enough time left.
Keep chatting. We can leave this on.
Okay, so at the root of your question is about optimizing for humans and optimizing for machines, and the differences between those. And when you think about legacy or monolith platforms, you're kind of forced into a specific choice, right? Like you either optimize for the machines or for the humans. I promise I'm coming back to your question, right? So when you ask, like, where does a platform like Contentful choose to be rigid or choose not to be? We choose to be rigid on the delivery. It's structured JSON. 100% of the time, it is structured JSON. Now, we're going to help you take that structured JSON through our SDKs and other tooling that we have and turn it into whatever the final form of delivery needs to be. HTML for your website, language of choice for your native mobile apps. That is about being rigid on the delivery. But on the human side, then it enables us to build tools to optimize for the human experience. So those immersive live preview environments where, as a user is typing, they get to see the impact of their work in real time before they click the publish button. That is powered because of the rigidity in the delivery. And we can cleanly say you can have an API endpoint that has access to unpublished content and an API endpoint that doesn't. The one that doesn't is for your public delivery. The one that can access draft content is for your internal preview, and they are structurally identical, right? That rigidity, that structure, that governance enables you to do that. And then on that delivery side, because it's structured, because it's JSON, it's well described, it's very tightly formatted, it's already optimized for the machines out of the box. So you don't have to make that choice of either or sacrifice too much time to optimizing for one or the other.
Awesome. Thanks. And speaking of time on two fronts, Gabriel's got back to us with a bit more clarity. And he has a really great point. So when when you're choosing kind of your infrastructure, composable, contentful allows you to get going quickly. And I think to his point is what he's saying, you add kind of your modern kind of agentic engineering into that tooling, and you've got an accelerated go-to-market. I mean, Claude and Contentful are like, those guys are best friends out of the box, right? So we've done all kinds of cool experiments running really elaborate content workflows that used to take probably like a week of effort between multiple teams and this little bit of content moving around its supply chain to like an hour. And it's like really tasty and it's well done. So I think to that point there, when you're looking at these monolithic tool sets that are kind of sort of sexy in a way to buy, like they've got all this kind of stuff going on, but there's Java underneath. There's like you got to have like a really serious bunch of folks ready to deploy this stuff, and it takes a long time.
High pain tolerance.
Yeah.
Very
So
high pain tolerance.
has its place, but we really love the nimble kind of go-to-market speed we have here. Just before we head out, I wanted to speak a little bit more about Contentful, the product itself, and maybe some of the features and some of the roadmap that you're open to discussing, just to leave folks who are listening to like, oh wow, I hadn't thought about this.
Yeah, maybe Luke, I can throw a couple thoughts out there, and then you can chime in with a few things. And without getting too far down the road of very specific things and commitments and stuff, I think as a business, we're thinking a lot about how we can support creating and optimizing experiences for humans and for machines, right? And ultimately, I think, when you think about how that translates into roadmap and ultimately business outcomes that come along with those things, right? We think about things like agentic analytics, which you'll see from us very soon, that are going to, I think bring a lot of value, because you can close that loop of, we've talked a lot, like Luke, you talked a lot about, is my content actually working for me? This is allowing you to create that, closed loop inside Contentful, where you can understand, is my content working? If not, what else should I try? I tried that. Did it work? And you can kind of continue on with that, right? And again, I think managing that with agents, so that, rather than having to go to like a very complex dashboard of data or a team of data analysts, you're just having a natural language conversation about like, hey, where does my content performance suck and where is it good? Okay, let's build an audience and create an experiment for where it's not doing so well, right? And then kind of taking that a little further on, I think, we're really starting to think a lot more about, I've talked about it a bit here too, but like just agentic content management, agentic assembly and delivery, and, how can we help folks deliver the value their business needs faster through those things, right? And, I think this can manifest in very small, basic ways. Like, I think sort of a huge pain point that has been a problem at the enterprise scale for a long time is just basic questions like, find me all of my media that doesn't have alt text. That can be a pretty painful process if you don't put a lot of concerted thought into that. I think all of a sudden you bring a content operations agent into the platform, or even, connect Claude Desktop with our MCP, you can just ask it that question and have the answer instantly, right? And I think that's, I guess, maybe the theme I would put forward in closing out, knowing that we're a couple minutes over here already, which is like, how can we empower folks to operate, more efficiently, produce higher quality content in kind of the fast moving world that we know we're all headed towards. But I mean, I know, Luke, you spend a lot of time thinking about this too, so I'd love to hear what I miss.
I'll give you my 30-second answer here. And I love the question, because really kind of the root of your question is, what are you most excited about?
Yeah, what's happening?
So if I think about the question in that context, we're at an inflection point right now in redefining what it means to create content. And a lot of the folks that I'm talking to right now, that's the problem at the end of their nose. That's the thing that they're thinking about. And it's all about, how do I type the right prompt to get the right thing on the screen? And I have gray hair. I've been doing this for a while. I can sit here and say, okay, I get that that's the problem that you're thinking about right now. Let me tell you about the next two problems that you're going to have. the next two problems that you're going to have after you get that absolutely dialed in, and everybody's working on that at lightning speed, the next two problems you're going to have are scale and governance. So as soon as you let the robots start making the content for you, now all of a sudden you're going to have more content than you know what to do with. How do you ensure that the right content is scaling and that you've got the appropriate governance controls in place to make sure that you're getting the right content out? And when I think about Contentful's history, kind of like where we started, we have great plumbing. Nobody likes to buy plumbing, but our infrastructure is so good.
Awesome.
Being able to run agents at scale and having the necessary controls in place to actually scale your content production and then govern it. Those are the feature sets that, you know, they may not make the headlines, the banners and the ads and all of that, but that's what's going to really change teams' daily experience of making and managing content in the next 2, 3, 4 years. That's what I'm excited about.
Awesome. I'm going to throw down a final excitement moment, and then add an M to your managing. I'm going to throw down migrating. So some of this fun stuff that we're doing here in the Dotfusion laboratory is kind of agentic migration tooling, and like we're literally moving stuff like 1,000 pages off WordPress to Contentful models with controls built in, like over the weekend. Like the AI is really great at migration, and you know there's intricacies to get it right and get it dialed in. But when you got Next React and like this just sweet modeling of content, that's the 3 M's of the roadmap. Looks like we got another couple hours of cool stuff that we could be rapping about, and maybe we can do this again. But people are probably finishing up lunch and looking to get back to work. So I just want to say thanks to the folks who have commented on our thread here. And for those of you who are just joining, listening, and for folks who listen in the future, we're just super stoked to share what we know. I'm Chris from Dotfusion. We are Contentful partners. We love building on the platform, obviously, and can't wait to just show some of the cool stuff we're doing with agents and with humans, and making the world a better place along the way. So thanks, Luke and Nick. Really, really appreciate your time and making some thought space to share with everyone here. I'm going to press some buttons and end the show, and we'll be back in a few weeks for episode 46. So thank you, guys.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.